You are welcome to have a seat. My name is Tyler. If I've not got a chance to meet you yet, I'd love to shake your hand and say hello. And oftentimes it means meeting new people, means getting a coffee or sharing stories, and I love those kind of things. I usually start with a question, something I want you to kind of get your brain thinking a little bit more. And this question that I want to ask us this evening is this. What if I told you that you had the capacity to do great things through God? Like, what if I told you that you, through your obedience, that you might be able to impact 1,100 leaders, like, because if you followed your obedience, that you could have that great impact? Michael, I like it that you're laughing because I think I would be laughing too. I think that that's kind of a little bigger than my scope and scale. I think I'm like, I don't know if that's like that lines up with reality. If someone was telling me that, I might be a little skeptical. I might be a little anxious about, like, could that be actually true? What if I told you that because of your faithful, obedient response to this, that your capacity would teach a whole nation how to worship Jesus? I think it's the right amount of silence for that kind of a question. That's one question that kind of feels a little bigger than I am, something that that just doesn't just happen. I don't think people just go out to say, you know, I'm going to claim that. Well, they do sometimes. They do send armies out to go claim another nation. There's wars and things happening, trying to make that happen right now. But usually it's not to try to help people worship Jesus. If you could believe me, I think you would learn to expect that you're going to make some sacrifices if you could kind of have that kind of impact. If you knew that you could reach that many people, I think that you would realize that, like, man, maybe my pain and suffering makes some sense now. I have a purpose that's bigger than I am. I think if you knew that you were going to have this great of an impact, that it would motivate you when things were tough. I'm excited to speak about St. Patrick today, and he wasn't made any promise like this. This wasn't any grandiose vision or like big picture like, hey, let's buy in on making this happen. No such promises were made to him, but St. Patrick did live a pretty incredible life, and I'm excited to share some of that with you today. Around 400 AD, Patrick, or Patricus, was growing up in northwest England, and he was a Briton. Culturally, his family had kind of become Roman, and there's this theme that kind of develops as you understand and follow St. Patrick. Now, there's a lot of myths, a lot of things that are mistruths. The snake thing, that didn't happen. Go ahead and just, write that one out. That there's no snakes in Ireland. It's kind of a silly thing. The actual truth of that is that Patrick was pretty devoted. And he was devoted against pagan practices, and he was devoted to help people follow Jesus. And we can see through his character, through his example, through his teaching, that he was very committed to be able to help people understand how to follow Jesus. And so that snake rumor that came up, that the patron saint against snakes was raised up because he was against paganism, which is represented by a snake. And so there's kind of like that kind of play on words that happens there. But there's really not native species of snakes to Ireland. So you guys, if you're like, no, I'm not a snake person. So, and maybe you're not either. So don't worry, you can go to Ireland. It's cool. You don't have to worry about that. Anyway, and when he was growing up, his family culturally became Christians. And I kind of think it's kind of similar to how we might live today about this kind of cultural accepting of Christians. Like, it was popular to do. Romans had moved through the area and basically like made everything Roman. There's a few different regimes that kind of changed how everybody practiced, and the Romans were one of these ones. And in about 400, it's pretty close to when Romans actually declared the national religion of Rome to be Christianity. And so they're like, them becoming Christians was a popular thing to do. Now, there's some different reports on what his family was composed of. There was potentially like somebody that he was connected to that could have been clergy, or somebody that could have been like a bishop or pastor, priest kind of person. But what most accounts account for this is that he was nominal in his faith. Basically, like, maybe that's my family's thing, that's not my thing. This is just, Christian things. Yeah, I kind of understand it. It's pretty clear that he knew the catechism, so he kind of knew, like, the tenets of faith, kind of knew some of the faith up here, but didn't really, like, make it down here. Most accounts show that Patrick enjoyed ridiculing the clergy. That's a fun tradition. I mean, it's not just pastor kids that do that. I told you it was going to be different. Now, we've done this probably, I don't know, for 10 years. We've done it for a long time. I remember growing up to family meals of St. Patrick's Day meals, and it was always Irish soda bread and corned beef and some kind of mashed potato thing called cold cannon or other things like that. And so when I learned about St. Patrick in school coming through my undergraduate, I was like, oh, this is awesome. We have to do this every year. And so then I told them, and I've shown them pictures, and we've seen the stories, and they've kind of heard it enough that they can usually give the spiel. But you're not going to be able to do that today because I'm going off the script. I know. St. Patrick, when he was a young man, he enjoyed wild living. He enjoyed ridiculing the clergy, and he also enjoyed living on the wild side, doing things that probably weren't very Christianly, just enjoyed kind of all the fruits of what the world allowed. And so when he was 16, a band of Celtic pirates invaded. And they kidnapped Patrick and some other young men, and they forced him to board a ship. And they sold him into slavery. It's kind of a big moment that's happening. I always think of pirates as kind of surly and strong and like forcing, some young men into slavery so they can make some money. And that's kind of the story that Patrick had. Now, Patrick was sold to a tribal chief and druid. I'm going to butcher it. I'm going to try it though. I'm going to say Maluk. That's what yeah. All right. So if it made it through Chris's muster, we're good today. That's good. I know. This is great. These are the things I need to talk more about. For the next 6 years, Patrick split his time between residing in Maluk's compound and extended periods of time in the wilderness herding cattle. I think this would be the worst thing I could think about doing. Like going out and herding animals. They can't talk back. There's no they're doing what they're doing. And animals are dumb, and so and cows are dumb, and they're doing dumb things. And your job is to keep the cows from doing the dumb stuff. That's what your job is. I just think it's a lonely kind of thing, and so I think this would be a really sharpening wilderness time for Pastor Tyler, and maybe for you too. Now, some of your introverts were like, "All right, that's awesome. I'm about it. Let's go hike with cows. Let's go." Praise God that we can be different. That's good. I think it's a lonely job, and I think following the cows and doing that kind of thing, I think it's a common theme that we see throughout many characters throughout the Bible, where there's these lonely jobs of being responsible for other things like sheep. We know King David was a shepherd. We know that many shepherds that became leaders, that you learn how to deal with the dumb sheep or the dumb cows, and then you can kind of maybe deal with people. Sometimes they're dumb. But I think that this would have been a very lonely job. And I think it would have been a time of refining. I think it may have been painful. I think at times he probably was mad and angry that he was taken from his home and forced to live in this kind of life. I don't think slavery is something that any of us would enjoy. And being forced to do labor against your will, we are, all us adults are forced to do labor, period, right? They just incentivize us with a paycheck. I don't know if following the cows would be so rewarding. As he's lonely and he's out there in the wilderness and he's shepherding these cows, he meets God in a pretty unique and powerful way. I think he's experiencing what we see in Romans 1:19 and 20. It says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived since the creation of the world, and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." Out in the wilderness, he didn't have a Bible. He wasn't, this is long before any kind of printing press that he would have hope. All he had was the teachings that he had left home with. And and he's out there and he's seeing the glory of God's majesty. His general revelation made clear. The stars in the sky, the beautiful growing, even the dumb cows, all sing the praises of God. And here's this young adult that's connecting with God in a powerful way. It was in the wilderness that Patrick connected with God. And in his autobiography called Confession, Patrick wrote this. He said, "After I had arrived in Ireland, I found myself pasturing flocks daily." Man, that sounds boring. And I prayed a number of times each day. More and more, the love and fear of God came to me. And faith grew, and my spirit was exercised until I was praying up to 100 times a day. Every day, and in the night nearly as often. A nominal Christian given into some really hard situation, stolen, forced to work against his will, it's connecting with God. And sometimes the pain and the suffering that we experience, we can see God working through those things. And it's oftentimes not until after the suffering's done that it makes sense. But here's Patrick, probably in a worse situation than some of the suffering that we deal with sometimes. And he sees God weaving through this and growing. I mean, do you know what it's like to pray 100 times in a day? That's a lot. I mean, somebody could probably do the math for me, but I bet you're praying about every 10 minutes if you're praying 100 times in a day. That's a lot of praying for. I totally agree. Patrick grew in his faith, and it developed the love for the Irish Celtic people. He developed the love for the people that had kidnapped him, that had his captors, his enslavers. These people he grew in love for. He learned their language. He learned their cultures. He learned what they cared about. He learned about what their issues were. And 6 years immersed, this is kind of like a missionary on-the-job training that just doesn't leave you. You don't forget about this kind of an experience. And it's said that Patrick understood the people, and the people could see that he understood them. One night after 6 years of captivity, Patrick had a dream. The voice instructed him to awaken early and walk to the seacoast. Your ship is ready. He had his dream. There's a ship ready. 3 days out. Go walk for 3 days. That's a long walk. A long walk that he's following this dream, and when he gets there to the seacoast, there's a ship there. And the accounts say that he negotiated his way on the ship, and he was able to leave Ireland. 3 days of walking after a dream. Preparation for ministry, I think, looks different for different people. This is what Patrick needed to be prepared. Maybe that wild living required him to be out in the wilderness. Maybe there's a tie that has to do there. And sometimes I think about it like when we're prepared for ministry, we need to be sanded off. We need to be, refined and prepared and suffer sometimes to prepare. So that brings us to our first point this evening, is that God works through ordinary means to prepare people. That time of shepherding the cows isn't wasted because he doesn't like it. A lot of times preparation is not stuff that you like. A lot of times it's a lot of hard work. James says this, he says, "Count it all joys, my brother, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." They tell me at the gym if I don't work out my trapezoids, I can't bench a lot. Apparently it matters. That's the wrong word. I'm thinking of something else. Triceps, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. I got where you have to. I totally am. 100. Hey, okay, I'll take my hey man. I'm good there. But they tell me that if I don't work my muscles equally, then I'm going to be limited in my strength. So I've been trying to work more on my triceps. Thank you, Josiah. And it sucks working triceps. It's fun. It's isolated, small movement, and you have to do a lot of it. And when I did it, I felt like my arms were going to fall off my body. It was not fun. That's what I was doing. Many drop sets. It was not my favorite. But I do kind of believe them because I'm starting to work those exercise groups because I have a goal for what I'm trying to do for bench. I want to be able to lift. Apparently, if you can bench press 225, you're in 3% of gym goers worldwide. I like that number. I want those odds. I think I've already surpassed that with squat and deadlift, but with the bench press, it's not far off. I was 185 recently, so I still got some work to do. I think sometimes preparation finds those places where those muscles are undeveloped and helps us develop them. So whether it's doing push-ups or skull crushers or whatever your exercise of choice is to try to balance your muscles, or maybe you're not a gym person, I think our preparation sometimes finds where we're weak. And that's where we need to work a little bit more. And so I wonder if Patrick shepherding the cows was a place to work out his wildness. I wonder if that wild living and that ridiculing of clergy made him rethink it. It's like, maybe it's not so bad at home, and maybe that priest knew what he's talking about some. I don't know. That's what conjecture. I'll let you think about it too. But I don't think it's an accident. I don't think a nominal faith in a wild living put into a place where he's got to work hard was an accident. I don't think it was. Now, when he leaves Ireland, the next 25 years of data is a little scant. It kind of jumbled and not necessarily recorded. That was a long time ago we're talking about. So it's a little limited in all the things. But what's clear is he boarded that ship, and he went and prepared to become a priest. Now, he was in Rome for some time. He was in Gaul for some time. And he also was a parish priest in England for about 25 years. So he had some traveling that he did right after this. But he went from this moment of nominal faith to being held captive, to being preparing for a life of ministry, and he has a career in ministry. And I don't think there was a bunch of crazy things that happened in his 25 years of being a parish priest. I think it was just regular ministry that he was just serving faithfully and where he was at, and he was blooming where he was planted. But he started his training in the scriptures and in matters of orthodox theology. And this was actually before St. Augustine's influence and a lot of things that he was. There was more orthodoxy, less competing ideas that were happening at this time. And things were developing. People were thinking about that stuff. But he served faithfully in England for his career. Now, there are some that would say that, hey, this is like a guy that lives his whole career, and then in retirement he goes and kills it at mission. Now, I don't necessarily subscribe to that. And at 47, I don't know how many people that are retiring at 47. But what I do know is that he continued to live a life on purpose, and it didn't matter what his age was. And when he was young, he was on mission. And when he was getting middle-aged, he was on mission. And when he was old, he was on mission. And he had an incredible ministry that started to develop right after this thing that happens. And I think we should all be looking forward to that, whether we're in the middle of our careers, retired from our careers, or even just starting to think about what our careers are. There's faithful service for us all. I don't think age is the important detail. I think God can accomplish miraculous things through people of all ages. And I think St. Patrick's story tells us some of that again. It was another dream that called Patrick to change his life again. An angel in this dream brought him letters from his former captives in Ireland. And one of these letters were from people that lived, or from the very people that lived all those years ago. And he could hear their words. We appeal to you, holy servant boy, come walk among us. Kind of a crazy dream. It was one of many letters that I didn't unpack all of the other letters that were there, but there's a pretty profound call to come back to the place that I wonder if he wanted to forget. I think walking among cows is probably a stinky job and not fun. And when he got out of there, I think I know what I'd be doing. I'd be like, oh man, thank God I'm out of that. After 25 years of serving in one place, I imagine there'd probably be a comfort of what you thought ministry looked like and how your life operated and what those things look like. And to have a call like this would probably not be Patrick's plan, I imagine. But what's clear is he didn't fight the call. What's clear is he treated it like a Macedonian call. And you might hear that sometimes at church, knowing what that is, but I thought it'd be helpful for us to look at that in Acts 16. Paul has a vision, and so a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia was standing there, urging him, saying, come to Macedonia and help us. And when Paul had seen the vision, immediately he sought to go into Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. A man of the scriptures, a call like this would seem like a Macedonian call to come and prepare for mission. So he understood this was a call to the Celtic people of Ireland. There's only one problem, though. These are barbarians. We're the civilized, posh, and separated people that are England, and we can't be associated with these barbarians. I mean, we've already assimilated into this Roman thing. We can't be going to assort with those kind of people. Did you hear about what the Celts do when they go to war? They strike buck naked with their sword and their shield, and they're running after people, and they're like demons, unpossessed. It's ridiculous. These are some wild people. We can't go bring the gospel to them. They're not civilized enough for it. And that's what the Romans thought of these Celtic people, the barbarians. So when he came to his uppers and he's like, hey, I have this mission. This is what I need to do. They're like, okay, cool. Let's get you ordained. Get out of here. Good luck. Because they didn't think there was any way they were going to reach these guys. There's about 150 tribes that are fighting constantly in Ireland for power. They're always like, it's not a big piece of land to have 150 little kingdoms. And they're always fighting with each other. And they're emotional. And they would groan and grunt and when they come into war. Can you imagine a whole army of naked men coming at you? Probably not. Probably not. Let's not do that. Let's not think that. It's crazy, though. And you would be like, I don't want to be with those people. They're weird. I think I'd think the same thing. This is who Patrick's called to, and you know what it's like. If you've ever been in like high liturgical church, you have to dress a certain way, right? You have to look a certain way. You're expecting the priest is going to look a certain way. He's wearing certain clothes. It's decorum. It's this environment that's not necessarily like, you don't want to get too excited. You just want to make sure you stand where you're supposed to stand and sit where you're supposed to sit, right? And that one of those guys that does that for 25 years that produces this solemn and holy environment where people come and reflect on the glory of God. It's a good thing. He's called to the naked, crazy people that fight. That's who he's called to. I think it's a little crazy. But sometimes our God dreams are just that. They called the people that are needing to do that. So they ordained him as a bishop, and they appointed him to Ireland as history's first missionary bishop. But I honestly think it was a little bit more like, okay, cool, see you later, man. You're crazy. Good luck. I hope you don't die. Tradition tells us that he assembled a team. I like this picture. This is a recreation of something recent. Some actors that are kind of showing what he did there. But he brought a little bit of a posse. This posse is a mixture of priests, a mixture of seminary students, and a mixture of lay people that have all come back to be able to help, like the right people, the right team to come back and help what he knows the needs of the Celtic people were. This really made me think about our discipleship strategy. I've talked about it in the last few weeks, but we have the third table, which is our table of mission, and we talk about it to share our table. That's kind of our goal. Is as we kind of learn, we start with inviting to the table. You come to the table, then you embrace the table, and then you share the table, and then you invite people to come to the table as part of the mission. That looks a lot of different ways. Sometimes that's dinner with us here on Sundays. Sometimes it's Magic the Gathering. Sometimes it's, art stuff and paint sips and all kinds of different things that are just places to be able to gather and be on mission. The idea is that we could use our tables, which doesn't have to be a table, to bring the gospel to where we live, work, learn, and play. So sometimes we're throwing the Frisbee, and it's missional work. We're creating and sharing the gospel by creating these environments where we are doing that. Sometimes it's that crazy gym stuff I was just telling you about, where we see investment in people and the gospel being shared because we're being on mission in those places. When Patrick assembled this team, it made me think about identifying our mission. This is the first step of our table. Then setting the table. That's getting the team or the resources you need to do that. Sometimes that means you're pulling teams from out of state to be able to help with college ministry. Sometimes that means you're walking and praying at the campus just to be able to prepare the soil for the spiritual work that's going to come. Sometimes that means you're getting an emergency substitute certification so you can serve within the school. Thank you for your service. I don't even know half the crazy yet. I'm sure I'm going to have some new stories, and I guarantee you there'll be some sermon illustrations by that preparation. I already know from wrangling these junior hires from football, when I go into the classroom, I'm sure there'll be some stories to share. But there's not just one way to do mission. And this tension is something that's going to build, and you see this with St. Patrick and the Roman Catholic Church, that they are trying to do ministry. There's a different philosophy of how they operate. We talk about sharing our table, but this is the work that you need to do. You need to identify your mission, you need to set the table, and then you need to host the meal, and you need to do the work. If all Brad's ministry was just prayer walks, that would be fruitful for the people that did the prayer walks. But he's preparing for something that's a little bit more, and that's what some of the work that you guys are preparing for. It's not just eating the food. Sometimes you have to preach the gospel. That's how people come to know. That's it's not just about just cool. We always have these great parties. Man, Jeff and Priscilla, they have the best parties. Patrick assembled a team for an impossible mission to reach the Irish Celtic barbarians. and probably was the laughingstock of everybody that sent him out. It didn't say that they sent the best. It didn't say that they pulled all the other bishops from the other place. No, he got seminary students. I'll just tell you, they're a funky bunch. Challenging every idea and that kind of thing, and the ideal is all you can get. And then send some lay people too, because like, hey, cool, they're not like of highly esteemed places. But that's not what he needed. He didn't need the perfect team of all the best people. Kind of reminds me of the message I shared last week where we talked about Jesus and the people that he pulled. Some fishermen and some other people that were like, oh, that guy can't talk and he's going to be preaching? That's kind of weird. I love that picture with the recreation of what this could look like. I don't know if they had the beautiful buildings that way, but gives you a picture, an idea. Put your shoes in there. Maybe you're part of this team and getting ready to host a meal. That tension I'm telling you about the different philosophy of ministry sounds like a heady kind of like, oh man, that's kind of a separate thing. And in the beginning, it didn't really matter because he went and for a long time, he just went and served. And he was faithful in his service. So what St. Patrick and did was just kind of move outside of a village and kind of serve it. And I'll show you a picture about that in a second. But if you're familiar with history, AD 432 is after Rome has declared Christianity as the national religion, and 380 with the Edict of Thessalonica. And that shifted significantly how ministry was done. When it wasn't the approved thing to do, I think it meant a little bit more. Because what we see historically is once that edict kind of got passed, it was popular to become a Christian. That's what the government believed. That's why you had influence. Everybody's a Christian. You're a Christian, I'm a Christian. And it really diluted and watered down what it meant to follow Christ because it was just this kind of like status symbol that you could put on like a new coat. The church had a way of kind of sharing the gospel with new groups. They really believed that they were doing God's work by moving into areas where God was not. And I actually believe that they were. But their method, I don't agree with. Their method was to civilize the people that they would go out and to reach. So they would not understand or care about anything that had to do with their culture. They wouldn't meet them where they were in any ways. They was like, nope, here's the brand. I've got a box, and this is what this is going to look like. And we're going to pattern you after what we know it to be successful. Here's the cookie cutter so you can look like all the other cookies for all the churches. And it sounds threatening, and it is. But basically, they were like, the only way you can know Jesus is if you can read Latin, if you can speak Latin, if you can come to church and it's in Latin, and if you can act like a Roman, then you can actually be ready for Jesus. That is not the message of the gospel. The message of the gospel isn't to come into church and just act like you're a disciple and then it works out. Jesus actually warned the Pharisees against this. People were coming into the faith and he told the Pharisees, he said, woe to you, scribes of the Pharisees. You bring on converts and you make them twice a disciple of hell as you are. Meaning hey, you're teaching them all the rules, but you're not teaching them how the heart of what we're supposed to be doing is. You're not showing the transformation what this is supposed to be like a holistic kind of lifestyle instead of just a bunch of head knowledge to accumulate. But the Roman church way, the Roman Christian way at this time, was to move into the area, go find whatever they deemed the middle of the city was, wipe it out completely, and build a church in the middle. And you can still see a lot of this colonialism that kind of came out and wiped that out and basically started in all the cities move around. Any older architectural kind of city development place, you can still see this to be the case. Because they thought that if they could civilize the people, then they'd be ready to accept Christ. Then and only then, when they were civilized enough, then they could become Christian, but they were expected to read and speak Latin, follow Roman customs, and do church the Roman way. This is not how Patrick did it. I kind of think Patrick's a little bit of a rebel in this. Now, he's been trained 25 years in thinking this way, right? Now, England's not doing this. England's established, and the church has kind of got a spot of how it's working in this way. But the Roman Catholic, or the Roman Christian way was to convert people to act like them, and they had a little understanding of how to approach people or see even what their needs were. It was just like, cool, let's bring the machine to establish in here. And that's why they called the Celtics barbarians. Patrick's approach was different. He had spent time with these people. And he spent time with them before he was kind of, it's rough. My kids really don't like the Catholic Church. And I don't have such a negative view on it, but I can understand historically why they have some of the opinions. They've read some history and they have some strong opinions about it. But that was Christianity for a long time. Like that's the way the gospel was shared, was this way. So to see Patrick do this early on and do it so different, it inspires me to think about doing ministry different, and it inspires how we gather here. But I feel that tension that he would feel because there was the institution and he's going outside and doing things differently. He had a high degree of autonomy because they didn't think he was going to be successful. So when they sent him out, like if you take a look at where Ireland is, it's this circle, this red circle right here. It's separated. It's not on the mainland. It's not to be probably super influential because it's kind of out there on its own. This is why it hasn't already kind of been under Roman rule, because it's a little further out and it's a little harder to get to. And well, we know those emotional naked fighters. They would have been hard to fight on their own island. The Roman machine thought this was an impossible mission. Patrick knew the people. He knew their language. He knew their issues, and he knew how to serve them. If you get a chance to read this book, I'd highly recommend it. If you like to think about how ministry is done and have some of the thoughts on there, there's a book called The Celtic Way of Evangelism. It's written by George G. Hunter III. And this is what he says in one of the quotes in the book. There's no shortcut to understanding people. When you understand the people, you often know what to say and do and how. When people know that Christians understand them, they infer that maybe Christianity's high God understands them too. This is so core to how we do mission here. This is like we have to meet people where they're at. And that's what I want to equip and encourage every single person in their context, whether it's the homeschool cohort or it's public school or if it's your workplace. Understanding the people that you're trying to reach is vital to be able to reach them. And it's natural to know what to do. I had to learn another degree of football to be faithful, to be a viable coach there. I'm learning things about throwing routes and receiving that I will never do. But I'm learning how to engage, and the character of bringing the sport has helped me to understand how to continue to engage with the kids. And I'll bring in expertise, and I'm bringing in help, and left and right, and getting coaching and scrimmages and lots of other things because I'm weak at that stuff. Because what I'm really good at is writing the numbers. Writing the numbers, blocking, that's what I was trained to do. That's what I do, and that's what I learned how to do first. This brings us to our second point, is that we must earn the right to share the gospel. We talk a lot about this at building relationship with our neighbors, but the first step we believe is that learning to trust a Christian is the first step, because until they trust us, they're not going to trust our message. And I don't like painting an us and them picture, but I do need you guys to understand, for us to reach people, we have to learn how to what people care about, what they speak about, and what they're involved in. And I'm not talking to endorse sinful behavior, but we're going to have to learn about people that do barbecues, because Traegers are important to people that do barbecues. We're going to have to learn about people that have apologetic arguments, because people that have apologetic arguments need the faith too, and they need to be able to engage with some of these things. We're going to need to learn with all different types of people. Now, that doesn't mean that I can do all those things, because I can't. Some of those things are not my strengths, but some of those are your strengths. And if you start learning the language and the issues and understanding the people that you're engaged with, you'll be surprised how easily the gospel flows when you're engaged with the people and you understand what they're about. In 1 Peter it says this. It says, now, who is there to harm you if you're zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Like if you're doing good to people, you're not going to be shamed. There's not going to be people that are thinking negatively, even if you're trying to venture into a new group of people to do ministry with. But even if you do suffer, you're going to be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your hearts honor Christ, the Lord is holy, always being prepared to make a defense for anyone who asks for the reason for the hope that is in you. Sometimes I think we take this to mean that I'm ready to fight. Anytime you want to say gospel, cool, I'm ready to go. Cool, you want to talk about scripture? Boom, let's go. I'm ready to fight. I got my dukes up. We should be ready for a defense with an answer that's prepared, but notice that there's work and gentleness and tenderness that happens with this, and that's actually what the next couple words say. It says, do it with gentleness and respect. I don't know about you guys, but this is not generally a position of gentleness and respect. But so many times when we're sharing our faith, this is the position that we're in. We're on the defensive, we're on the offensive, and we're ready to take ground before we even have relationship to do so. And I don't think that's right. Gentleness and respect. Having a good conscience so that when you are slandered, those that revile your behavior in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if that should be God's will, than for doing evil. I lost my cool yesterday. It doesn't happen. Well, sometimes it happens. It doesn't typically happen when I'm in front of other people. Like, I really try to work hard to hear the Holy Spirit's direction and have self-control. But this referee was having a really hard time making consistent calls. Now, my losing the cool isn't me. I didn't cuss him out. I didn't put him down. I didn't come after him, get physical or nothing like that. My losing the cool is I yelled at him. Told him he needed to video his calls and he needs to video his stuff and he needs to get better. He told me I needed to leave the field. That was literally the words that were said. Now, that was said at the top of my voice. I'm not going to lie. But it wasn't slanderous. It wasn't malicious. It was I just didn't think he was being fair. And I was I left the field thinking about this. I'm not ashamed that I stood up for what I felt like was an injustice. But I probably took some major withdrawal out of that account by the way that I communicated that information to him, because it was not done with gentleness. And it was not done with respect. And it was done in front of other people, which I know better than. And then maybe it just took all this time for me right now to feel some conviction about it, because I was I didn't do anything wrong, but it was kind of bugging me a little bit. The league came and talked to me about it on that day, and the leadership of the league, and they're like, yeah, that super surprises us. You haven't done any of that. And I'm like, I don't. I still don't. I don't plan on having that reputation of doing that. The thing that I encourage you to think about is when you're doing ministry, you're going to be slandered. When you're doing ministry, you're going to be suffered in pain, and things will be difficult, and there'll be injustices that come against you. And it's not just for you to stand by idly and do nothing. My appeal isn't an appeal to say, hey, you should do what I did in that moment. But you should be thinking when you're trying to reach people, it's going to be tough sometimes. Sometimes I think we're too focused on making elegant arguments that we miss the good that could be possible. I think we miss the gentleness and the respect that we need when we're sharing the gospel. Sharp tongues and eagerness to win arguments are not always the win for the situation. Sharing the gospel and love means exactly what I think Paul wrote in Ephesians chapter 4. He said, rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way in him who is the head, unto Christ, from whom the whole body, joined together and held together in every joint and sinew, different verse, every joint which has been equipped, which each part working properly makes the body to grow so that it builds itself up in love. I talk about this environment for us at dinner to be an experimental place for us to learn how we can connect with different people that think differently than we do. I talk about and hope that this is a place where we can experiment with relationships so we can understand that, hey, you're different, and I need to figure out how we have common ground. I think that's, if we need to do it here so we can learn how we do it out there. That's what this hope of bringing the gospel with us, that we speak the truth in love in here and out there. We need to be obedient to the Great Commission. We need to be sharing the gospel. We need to be engaging in the ministry that Jesus left us with until he comes back. But we need to prepare our defenses, and we need to deliver them in gentleness, respectfully, and in love, as we are doing so unto Christ. Sometimes we share correct information in the wrong tone, and it becomes a loss because we didn't have enough relationship or enough care to be able to engage in a relationship that way. And this isn't just us choosing this stuff. This isn't just a moralistic, cool, you should do better. This is no, you need to trust the Holy Spirit. And sometimes you need to be prepared with the defense and then wait for the Holy Spirit to give you the timing for when to share that news. And it's tough sometimes. But the first thing that Patrick did when he returned back to Ireland as he went back to go see his captor, Milluch. The tribal chief heard of Patrick's return and a team, and he was filled with fear. The story goes that Milluch locked himself in his hut. He set fire to it because he wasn't willing to face Patrick, and he thought that he was coming to retaliate for the captivity, for him being bought as a slave. Patrick's hope was to be able to extend forgiveness, to help him to see the grace of the gospel. That's what he was coming back for. But this tribal leader couldn't see it any other way. And he decided that that's how he needed to go out. What's neat is that Patrick still understood how to speak with the people, and he still understood the language of the Celts. So him and his team would set out of camp, and they would join in their work. This was very much part of their mission. Chris, will you put the picture up? This is a picture, a drawing of what some of these little communities would be. And this would be a village, and you can see that there's like these stone walls that were kind of protecting them because there was constantly a risk of war of this neighboring kingdom to be able to come and try to take them over. And so there was some protection, and you can kind of see that it draws back there, and there's some places where they can, cultivate crops and some other things like that. And so what Patrick and his team would do is, if you could say like that dark green corner on the bottom left, right, bottom left, yeah. They would set up camp right down that corner, and they would just help with the work that they saw there. They would haul wood, they would haul water, they would just help do the dishes, they would just, whatever they could do to be a blessing, they just joined in. I think the translation for this is that as they were looking for ministry opportunities, they just were helpful where they were at. Which sometimes at a church plant means that you could come a little early and help set things up, or stay a little late and tear some things down. Or maybe you're bringing some bread because you want to participate in the gathering. It's not something glamorous or like amazing. It's just like serving in small ways. It's like, oh, cool, I can help in that way. Let me lend some hands in that way. And that's what they did. And here's what's great. Eventually, the people were like, why are you doing this? Why are you just coming out and helping me? What does that look like? How do you keep doing this? And then it would give them an opportunity to share the gospel. This community would be one that St. Patrick would engage with, and as they earned the right to share the gospel, somebody would believe them. They would believe in the gospel, and one became two, and then two became the whole village. And what was neat is they started to develop these little monastic communities of this whole group of people working together and integrating their faith in everything that they did, whether it was cooking dinner, doing the dishes, hauling wood, the work of their things. They would move outside the camp. People would come to know Jesus. They would leave 2 from their party. So if they were 20, they became 18. And they would take 2 from that village, and they'd move on to the next village. And they did that again. It's estimated he did this over 150 times. My kids complain we've moved a lot. We did not leave 2 behind, and we did not pick up 2 every time. Ouch, that hurts. The Apostle Paul wrote this to the church of Corinth. He says, what is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants whom you believed, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, and God gave the growth. I think this is what Patrick is seeing here, that he's just being faithful in small things, and that he is planting, and he's watering, but he's not responsible for the growth. So they hauled wood until somebody was curious why they've been hauling wood, and maybe it took 6 months of hauling wood for somebody to be open to being able to share the message. Are you ready to serve like that? Are you ready to love your neighbor in that way? To put up with their smoking, or to put up with whatever the things that annoy you about them are? Are you ready to love them until they're ready to be curious? So many times we're eager to enjoy mission, but we don't see that there's mission all around us. And sometimes our mission is engaging those that are the people that we want to be the least to us. He said, neither one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each one will receive his wages according to his labor. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building. We're called to do the work of planting, to watering, but we're not called to count the results. That is God that is the one that measures the results. I think St. Patrick knew that he was called to do the small thing and to keep doing it. And when you look back at the results, it's pretty glorious, and the glory goes to God. I loved how he worked out the ministry in the villages. When one comes to know Jesus, the whole village would come and be eager to hear the news. And it was just in the everyday stuff. It wasn't just like now they had a Sunday gathering to go to. No, this is a transformative, everyday kind of faith that when they got up, they'd have incredible prayers and they would engage with people with incredible prayers. And then it wasn't just prayers, but they were just showing the light of Jesus to those that are around them. And I think neighboring villages would be eager and curious. And I think the ministry picked up quicker and quicker because the word would have gotten out. And it wouldn't be 6 months waiting for somebody to be eager for a question. It might be 2 days. Hey, we've been waiting for you. I'm excited to hear this news that they told me back there. Besides a transformed community, Patrick would create these monastic communities because he spoke their local dialect and he engaged right where they were. They didn't seek to make the Celts Roman. He wasn't reproducing the church work that he did in England. He was bringing the transforming gospel into their language for them to be able to operate. And this would be a big problem later. Like, not a few years after this is kind of taken off and things are working, they're calling him back and they're like, what are you doing? We're hearing these stories. It's incredible. And he starts telling them, oh, wait a minute, they don't have the haircut? But there's only the approved haircut. This is not a joke. This is literally what they were fighting over. Oh, they don't wear the robes? But the robes, that's how are they going to know God if they don't wear the robes? I'm still waiting for mine. It's in the mail. It's there. It's there. Thank you, Michael. I don't think you think this way about St. Patrick when you think about him. When we think about St. Patrick, we think about like dyeing rivers green and eating green stuff and wearing green and pinching people and leprechauns and pots of gold and silly things like that. But we don't think about like the first bishop missionary that went and didn't come in and claim status, didn't step on a big stage and preach loudly to a lot of people. No, he served faithfully in small things. And because he served faithfully in small things, he had incredible results. I hope that you can see past the world's way of celebrating Patrick's death on March 17th. It's not just a time to get drunk. I would argue there's not a time to get drunk. But that's how the world has seen it. I think St. Patrick's Day is a way for us to celebrate a committed missionary who did the small work over and over and over again to see incredible results. St. Patrick ordained over 1,100 priests by doing faithful and small things. It's said that he won the island of Ireland to Christianity. He brought peace where there was not peace any time before this because of all of the naked fighting. His grassroots discipleship gives us methods that we can emulate, but I also think things that we can realize that it's not about making people into our image. It's not about making people Roman. You don't have to speak Latin to follow Jesus. You don't have to speak Christianese. You don't have to speak Table of Hope language. We have some language too. You don't have to speak our language to be able to follow Jesus. I think it shows that God works through ordinary means to prepare people, that we have to earn the right to share the gospel, and that incredible things can happen when we trust God with the results.